Great, thank you. Welcome everybody to the City Council regular meeting for Monday, December 14th, 2020, our last council meeting of the year. City Clerk, could you do the roll call, please?
Absolutely. Mayor Robinson?
I'm here.
Deputy Mayor Neuenhouse?
Here.
Councilmember Barksdale?
Here.
Councilmember Lee?
Here.
Councilmember Robertson?
I'm here.
Councilmember Stokes? Councilmember Stokes? You're muted.
Sorry, I was punching the little button, but it didn't respond. I'm here.
You're fine, thank you. Councilmember Zahn?
I'm here.
Perfect, thank you.
Great. Council members on, could you please lead us in the flag salute?
Yes, Mayor. I pledge allegiance
Allegiance
to the flag of the
Flag.
United States of America
America.
and to the
And to the
republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, we have a special commendation tonight from a remarkable group that has done amazing work for our community for a long time. And I've asked Councilmember Robertson to please read this commendation.
Thank you. This is a commendation for the women, Somerset women of Medic One, and I have a picture on the screen that was taken of several years ago of many of these wonderful women. And since I'm a Somerset woman, I got the pleasure of being able to read this. And a lot of these ladies are my neighbors and friends. So whereas the Somerset Women for Medic One formed in the early 1970s, the first community organization with a mission to support Bellevue's new Medic One program, dedicated to training and equipping paramedics with the Bellevue Fire Department. And whereas the Somerset women, former members of the Overlake Memorial Hospital support group, showed crucial early confidence in what was only the second paramedic program in the country, recognizing that it could dramatically improve the chances for residents suffering a cardiac arrest or trauma. And whereas through bake sales, car washes, and other fundraisers, the Somerset women raised enough money for purchase of Bellevue's first Medic One vehicle. And whereas over the years of continuing support, the Somerset women raised money to cover expenses associated with paramedic training, community CPR training, and annual DUI distracted driving drills at local high schools. And whereas supplies purchased with funds raised by the group include a medical supply unit, a trauma mannequin, and water rescue equipment, as well as child restraint systems that have made transport of younger patients significantly safer. And whereas the Somerset Women for Medic One has now disbanded just this year, but their legacy is an extraordinary and successful paramedic program that would not have been possible without them. Therefore, on behalf of Lynn Robinson, Mayor of the City of Bellevue, and on behalf of the City Council, I do hereby commend the Somerset Women for Medic One for providing needed support early and often for Bellevue's Medic One program, leading to thousands of lives saved over the past 50 years. And that is signed Lynn Robinson, Mayor. And I know we have Martha Garmanian on the line, and I saw also another Somerset woman for Medic One, Dorothy Galley, is watching tonight's council meeting as well as many others. And I don't know if we'd like to give Martha a chance to say a few words.
Mrs. Garmanian, would you like to speak?
Surely, thank you so much. Until the dissolution of Somerset Women on July 30th of this year, I was president of the group. Therefore, on behalf of the members, I thank the Bellevue Fire Department and the Bellevue City Council for the just presented commendation. In 1974, a group of women residents of Somerset decided to donate proceeds of a bridge tournament to support the newly established Bellevue Medic One program. This was the beginning of a 46-year relationship between Bellevue Medic One and Somerset Women of Medic One, who assumed responsibility for banking, recording, and acknowledging donations and dispersing funds as requested to Medic One. Donations in those early days were generous, often in hundreds of dollars. Those dwindled in recent years. Membership in Somerset Women for Medic One also, in spite of recruiting efforts, had fallen off, with the remaining members, some of whom were members who were founders of the group, finding it difficult to perform the duties required of them. At our November 2019 meeting, a vote approved dissolution, excuse me, at the end of the organizational year, June 30th, 2020. Again, on behalf of the members of Somerset Women for Medic One, a giant thank you to Bellevue Medic One for the many times they have been quite literally a lifeline in times of need. In addition to their professional responsibilities, for several years, an annual holiday luncheon for Somerset Women for Medic One and their guests has been prepared and served by the medics. Thank you all. These people are heroes to all of us. Happy holidays, everyone, and stay safe.
Oh, Mrs. Garmanian, you're just the heart of Bellevue. Thank you so much for all you've done.
Thank you for supporting us by giving commendation. Thanks so much.
Well deserved.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, we're on to approval of the agenda. I'd like to make a note that the published packet had a duplicate memo for item B on the consent calendar. And the council received the correct memo this afternoon and put in part of tonight's desk packet. And with that, let's have a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's what I meant to say. The agenda, thank you. And I heard a second, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Great, thank you. We're on to oral communications. City Clerk, do we have speakers tonight?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, there are 9 speakers total this evening, and based on topics signed up for, I don't believe we're going to run into any 3-on-3 rules. So with that, the first speaker this evening is Court Olson. Mr. Olson, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Thank you. Your time begins now.
Good evening, Mayor Robinson and Deputy Mayor Neuenhouse and other council members. Thanks for this opportunity to speak to you again. I had a meeting of the People for Climate Action Leadership Circle this morning, and I'm speaking on their behalf and the consensus from that meeting. First of all, we just want to thank you again for the additional budget adds that you supported last week to increase the support for the environmental stewardship plan and its implementation in the next biennium, and for also creating funds to support an advisory task force. So thank you very much for that. We're seeing on your agenda tonight a resolution 9859 asking you to approve the environmental stewardship plan. And the way that resolution is written, it doesn't seem to be in alignment with the extra budget funds that were allocated last week. So we'd like to really urge that the reference to a 5-year plan be deleted. We don't see this plan as a 5-year plan. It still is going to need significant review and improvement, even in the next biennium, as your budget allocations have indicated. We also suggest that the resolution acknowledge that there will be periodic updating, and the way that the plan itself states that it will be adjusted, quote, as we learn anew what is working well and what needs to change to create the sustainable future we seek, end quotation. So to emphasize the urgency, I want to just repeat the words of Bill McKibben, who has said that when it comes to climate change, quote, winning slowly is the same as losing, close quote. While we very much appreciate the hard work that's been done on the environmental stewardship plan thus far, we believe that the plan still needs strengthening. Especially needed are additional actions focused on existing buildings. So let's be sure in the months ahead that the city employs truly impactful actions and avoids being characterized as winning slowly. Otherwise, the climate change clock is ticking rapidly towards a grim reckoning with an unstoppable climate catastrophe as the outcome. So PCA is watching very carefully. We hope the city will strengthen the environmental stewardship plan, and that end, we look forward to participating in the new Environmental Stewardship Advisory Task Force, and we urge the city to convene this group in the first quarter of 2021. Thanks very much for your time, and Happy New Year to everyone.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Litov, or Saki Litov. Mr. Litov, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you. Your time begins now.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Robinson and other council members. My name is Saki Litov, and I'm a resident of Eastgate. I've worked with the homeless for decades as a volunteer. I've served as the president of a homeless services nonprofit in Seattle. I've been the clinic director for an outpatient mental health facility in Bellevue, and I currently serve on the community advisory group organized by Congregations for the Homeless that's been meeting for over a year now. I hope this evening is that my words will help guide your thoughts in the upcoming discussion of how the new tax revenue allocated for homelessness might be best spent in our beautiful city. While the recent murder of a Plymouth Housing caseworker in Seattle by a Plymouth Housing resident is deeply troubling and sad, it's elevated the conversation around the need for funds for mental health counseling and support. But to think that such a conversation shouldn't also include concerns about substance abuse ignores the fact that they are inherently intertwined. And also the fact that a significant percentage of those experiencing homelessness struggle with both mental health issues and substance abuse makes the conversation around how to spend funds on homelessness an incredibly complicated one. We need look no further than to our big sister to the west to see what a failed plan to help can do to a city. And I truly believe none of us wants to see that happen in Bellevue. The city of Bellevue is a stakeholder in the construction of a huge campus that will house close to 200 homeless individuals in my neighborhood of Eastgate. The campus also includes affordable housing for individuals and families right next door, possibly 500 to 600 children and adults and 300 plus units. And there's even a possibility there will be yet another facility in Eastgate that will shelter yet another 100 homeless individuals. Is it not your responsibility to ensure the safety of those being served, as well as helping ensure the safety of the neighbors, businesses, and community? Eric Johnson, in the recent Como broadcast of the Fight for the Soul of Seattle, said, and I quote, "And the city and the county prosecutors don't prosecute, and the judges dare not step out of line, and the tents persist, and the drugs are rampant, and the businesses just give up. And the city council reimagines and wings it through a sloppy little revolution that has brought the best city in America to its knees," end quote. This does not need to happen here in Bellevue. I implore you to ensure these new tax dollars, all 9 million of them, are spent in a way that ensures the safety of not only the homeless, but those who support them, their neighbors, and the larger community. Putting a roof over someone's head is simply not enough. Please ensure there are funds for the mental health and substance abuse counseling and services so desperately needed. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Thaddeus Gregory. And Mr. Gregory, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Your time begins now.
Excellent. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council members. Thank you for your time and for providing this opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Thaddeus Gregory, and I represent SRM, who's proposing a comprehensive plan amendment to fix one of the last remaining underdeveloped split zone parcels in downtown Bellevue. This comment addresses the 100 Bellevue Way Southeast development, Ordinance 6558, shown as agenda item 12A on tonight's agenda. The parcel in question is part of a future development site that sits at the corner of Bellevue Way Southeast and Main Street, a crucial intersection in a designated southern gateway into and out of downtown Bellevue. At present, the site contains a one-story setback drive-through restaurant and a one-story strip mall, but SRM has a different vision for this important gateway. SRM intends to provide a mixed-use development that incorporates much-needed centrally located housing with ground retail and commercial space, all reflective of the mixed-use identity of its surrounding City Center South neighborhood. To achieve this vision, however, we need your votes of approval on Ordinance 6558 tonight. SRM's project site contains one of the last underdeveloped split zone parcels along the southern edge of downtown, with a zoning line that bisects an existing building. Bellevue City Council has reviewed parcels like this before and has a demonstrated history of fixing these split zone parcels. Today, this City Council can help finish the work. Beyond the history of fixing split zone parcels, however, there are numerous additional reasons to support our proposed amendment. Importantly, there are many changed conditions affecting this property that have not previously existed. First, the project site is under common ownership, which will allow a cohesive approach when redeveloping the parcel as part of Bellevue's signature southern gateway into downtown. Second, Bellevue now has enhanced city policies tailored to manage downtown edge transitions. Third, Bellevue has a renewed focus on fostering compatible redevelopment. Our project will bring both a cohesive design to the gateway redevelopment and a development reflective of the City Center South neighborhood and its unique aesthetics. And fourth, Bellevue and the surrounding Puget Sound region is currently in a housing affordability crisis that can only be improved by providing more housing that this council can help foster by supporting our amendment. Our project is also consistent with the Growth Management Act goals and the local city goals found in Bellevue's comprehensive plan. By supporting our amendment, Council can help encourage density in our transit options and strengthen City Center South's identity as a mixed-use neighborhood, all while preserving a buffer of office and professional office-owned parcels surrounding the split zone parcel. Thank you again for providing this opportunity to speak, and I again ask for your support for the SRM Comprehensive Plan Amendment, Ordinance 6558. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. The next speaker is Ellen Lenhart. Ms. Lenhart, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thank you very much.
Your time begins now.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Robinson and ladies and gentlemen of the council. My name is Ellen Lenhart and I'm a Bellevue resident. I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to comment today on the Glendale Country Club Comprehensive Plan Amendment, which is listed as Ordinance 6559 on your agenda. We applaud the city and the Planning Commission and the council for moving this amendment forward. It represents such a great opportunity for adding new housing near transit. And at the same time, we're only developing a little part of the land, but we'll preserve about 80% of this parcel as wetlands and natural open space. The preservation of this magnificent open space is very near and dear to my heart because I live adjacent to the course, so I get to enjoy its beauty every day. But adoption of this amendment will benefit the city of Bellevue and all its residents by supporting Glendale's efforts to maintain that open space, those majestic trees, and that sparkling creek for the future. Thank you very much and happy holidays to all of you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Clint Whitney. Mr. Whitney, can you hear me?
I can.
Thank you. Your time begins now.
Good evening, Mayor Robinson and City Council members. My name is Clint Whitney, and I serve as the General Manager of Glendale Country Club. I'd like to applaud the city's work and efforts on moving forward the Comprehensive Plan Amendment for Glendale Country Club Ordinance 6559. As Bellevue grows and changes as a city, it's important that community assets like Glendale are able to make reasonable changes to their property to ensure their long-term viability, which this amendment would provide. The land use change sought by the club is modest and is a low density change. It preserves more than 87% of this small parcel we seek to redevelop as natural wetland and open space. It will add up to 30 new residences on Northeast 8th Street, which is one of the city's primary transit routes. I truly see this as a positive for both the community and the club as we both build for the future. In closing, I'd like to express my sincere thanks to all the members of the Bellevue City Council and its city planning commissioners for their efforts and leadership, and wish each of you all the happiest of holidays. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. The next speaker this evening is James McEachran. Mr. McEachran, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thank you.
Great. Your time begins now.
With respect, Mayor Robinson and Deputy Mayor Newenhouse. I was speechless after reading your agenda items, and my wife said, "That's odd, Jim, you're never speechless." And I said, "I'm looking at the initiation of a plan regarding implementation of HB 1590 and a work plan to begin to respond to the need for affordable, attainable housing with services." And I just kept reading, and I thought, when you plant seeds, sometimes you think, will they ever grow? And you can't do much but wait for action. And I just commend you, beloved council, on action. I see C1 from our affordable housing plan that we put together in May of 2017. Then I read your council library. It's a marvelous narcotic every night, but I tend to get through it all. And I'm amazed that this plan begins to implement everything we've dreamed for in making a difference around sustainable and affordable housing with services. Transmit a letter to you some years back said, "Nibbling around the edges with simple, easy actions will not have a significant impact on housing affordability. This will require bold actions by the City Council to do more than is being done today." I just want to tell you, I'm so proud of New Beginnings. We are transforming to a new future together. And along the way, the city and the park that welcomes all will provide both housing and services to ensure that people can flourish in a city that welcomes all and is open for business. I'm just commending you and saying, anything I can do to help, we're here to move this forward in the future. Bless you. On to 2021.
Thank you, Mr. McEachran. The next speaker is Brian Whiteside. And Mr. Whiteside, can you hear me?
I can.
Perfect. Your time begins now.
Hello, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. My name is Brian Whiteside, and I've been a Bellevue resident for 29 years and a Glendale member for about half that time. It's a pleasure to be with you today and speak in favor of the Glendale Country Club Comprehensive Plan Amendment. Moving this amendment forward means the club can make the infrastructure investments needed to keep it environmentally sound and sustainable for the long term. The club has been proud to be part of Bellevue and this neighborhood for decades, and this action will keep us here for many more to come. Thank you for this opportunity to speak and support, and happy holidays to everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Whiteside. The next speaker is Terry Sinclair. And can you hear me? Terry Sinclair.
Now, can you hear me now?
There we go. Thank you. Your time begins.
Thank you. Good evening, council members. My name is Terry Sinclair, as she said, and I'm a Bellevue resident, and my information is on file. I'm very concerned with the location of the affordable and low-income housing being planned for the same parcel as the low-barrier men's shelter and the transitional housing. Residents of the affordable housing will include children who likely will have two working parents just to make ends meet. The children will therefore be at risk as they go to and from school, or as they will be either that or they'll be imprisoned in their own homes just to keep them safe from others around. We all know that the low barrier men's shelter will attract drug dealers and will include men who use drugs and alcohol, and will have to do that outside the shelter where they'll be unsupervised. And the location is also close to a preschool and a dance studio and other children who will be too close to the shelter elements and those who it attracts. I think it's unconscionable to cite the low-income housing and the shelter facilities on the same property. Please, I ask you to reconsider this shared property plan if you care about children. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sinclair. The final speaker signed up this evening is Doug Wheeler. And Mr. Wheeler, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Your time begins now.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Newenhouse, and council members. My name is Doug Wheeler. I am the Director of Mental Health at Congregations for the Homeless in Bellevue. The comments I share with you tonight are specific to the proposed expenditures human services allocation section of the memo from Matt Cummins, Director of Community Development. CFH is the only Eastside provider for adult men experiencing homelessness. We know firsthand that mental illness and substance abuse live side by side. Quite often our clients don't know they have a mental health problem, but can identify that they suffer from a substance abuse problem. In 2019, CFH began an on-campus mental health program led by myself, as I specialize in mental health therapy and am well-versed in substance use disorders. This program is embedded within CFH, where service models are built on the foundation of our core values of relationship, dignity and respect, community, and empowerment. We've observed thousands of men hit insurmountable barriers to accessing treatment because the system is overburdened, and the disparity between needed treatment and resources is huge. We are currently addressing between 10 and 20% of the mental health and substance abuse needs that we encounter. These numbers reflect that we are drastically undersourced. In order to meet the needs of those we serve and the community at large, additional funding is needed. We have 3 desired outcomes. Number 1, growing a shelter-wide group participation model, providing individual therapy and making referrals to high-quality treatment programs, leading to greater health and stability. Number 2, CFH staff and clients continue to build the Serenity program to provide pre- and post-substance use support, resulting in higher levels of sobriety, leading to greater job and life stability. And number 3, gather reliable data to substantiate reduced substance use, better interpersonal relationships, greater job stability, and reduced number of conflicts, lessening the need for police, medical, and other emergency services. In closing, CFH currently operates 90 units of supported subsidized housing for men who were formerly homeless. We are very interested in working with the city to see how the 1590 funds could expand our housing and supportive services so more men can get off the streets and thrive in our community. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the critical need for the funding for our mental health program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. There are a few minutes left allocated to oral communications. So at this point, I would ask if there's anyone else participating in tonight's meeting that would like to provide comment to the City Council. Please use the raise hand function or *9 if you're connected with a phone. Mayor, I do not see any hands raised.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Miyake, I think you have some good news for us.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And council members, I have one item under the city manager's report this evening, which is, as you mentioned, a good news story in that the Parks and Community Services Department was recently accredited by the Commission for Accreditation of Parks and Recreation Agencies. You know, this is truly a major accomplishment on the part of our Parks Department in that it attests to the professionalism of the department and that it's meeting the highest standards of all its operations. With that, I don't want to take too much thunder out of the Michael Shiosaki's comments to you about the reaccreditation itself. So Michael?
Thank you, City Manager Miyake. Oops. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Newenhouse, and City Council members. I'm Michael Shiosaki, and I am very happy to be here this evening to share this good news story about Parks and Community Services' recent reaccreditation. Next slide, please. So tonight's presentation is really just to share this good news with you, and no council direction is needed. So as noted in a presentation to the City Council back in February of this year, accreditation is a process for evaluating the efficiency and effectiveness of agency operations by comparing practices to industry standards. Participating in accreditation process means that our department is subject to routine, intense reviews of our policies and procedures and practices by outside reviewers who evaluate our respective operations against national best practices. Next slide, please. So accreditation brings many benefits, and this slide is not a comprehensive list of all those benefits, but rather it's intended to kind of briefly touch on the main benefits that impact the city, the public, and our employees. So first, the arduousness of the accreditation process clearly demonstrates the department's and the city's commitment to strive for excellence through continuously examining our operations and making improvements to ensure the best services are provided to the public. Also, we continue to strive to be a leader in our region, in the state, and the country. And the accreditation process helps to ensure that just about everything we do is based on best practices in our individual work areas. And this in turn results in a professional organization that stands out among its peers and is nationally recognized. The rigorous review by outside experts ensures the safety and well-being of our residents, as everything from our programs to our maintenance and risk management practices are reviewed. Another benefit of accreditation is the commitment to establish and maintain plans, policies, and procedures based in best practices. And this builds an agency-wide culture of professionalism and pride. And pride in knowing that we work in an organization that's not content with mediocrity, but an organization that works hard to be the best in its class. The public and the city and the community benefit from having accredited departments because it's one of the processes to ensure that a department is adopting the best available policies, procedures, and practices, and then implementing them. Next slide, please. So our department applies for accreditation via the Commission for Accreditation of Parks and Recreation Agencies, or CAPRA. And CAPRA is the only national accreditation for parks and recreation agencies. Bellevue's Bellevue Parks and Community Services was first accredited in 2005 and has since been reaccredited in 2010 and 2015, and of course this year. So we are one of only 3 accredited agencies in the state of Washington. So that is Bellevue and Shoreline and Tacoma Metro Parks. And we are the only agency in the state that's been accredited 4 times. And we're one of only 186 nationally accredited agencies. Next slide, please. So accreditation is a lengthy process that requires our department to continuously review, update, and develop our policies and procedures to align with best practices. And while our department is formally accredited only every 5 years, the dedicated and excellent work of our team is continuous to ensure we can meet the rigorous standards. The whole assessment process consists of a total of 151 standards. 37 of those are called fundamental standards, and you're required to meet 100% of those. There's then 114 non-fundamental standards, and you need to meet 95% of those, so 108 of the 114. And so these standards are set for our work within the department about planning and organization and administration, programs and services management, facility and land management, evaluation, assessment, and research. But there's also standards set for our work with other departments in the city and for the city as a whole in areas such as human resources and financial management, law enforcement and security, and risk management. So it's really high recognition to achieve national accreditation. And for our 2020 accreditation, we are proud to report that not only were we reaccredited, but we achieved what we call a perfect score, passing all 151 rigorous standards. And this is the first time for Bellevue to achieve this level. Next slide, please. So our reviewers also provided high praise for some specific areas of excellence within our work. First, under embracing diversity, their comment was, the community is diverse and so is their department. The makeup of the department is reflective of the community they serve. Under public engagement, Bellevue Parks and Community Services takes the time to know the people they serve and also get feedback from them. In evaluating programs, the department consistently evaluates their programs so that they can adapt to what the public desires. In terms of our hiring for equity guide, this guide was well-written and a good resource. In establishing partnerships, one of our partnerships they talked about is our long-term partnership with school district, and community and regional partnerships are an important part of the department's work. They also touted our great involvement with with local, regional, state, and federal planning efforts. And so the department is not an island. They work with other agencies to provide resources and programs to their community. Next slide, please. So our expert review panel also noted these department plans as excellent, even suggesting that they may be used as national models. In fact, one of our reviewers specifically noted that the department's recreation program plan was the best she had ever seen. Next slide, please. So achieving our 4th accreditation is really a hallmark of excellence of your Parks and Community Services department. Passing all 151 standards with the perfect score, along with the accolades provided for our operations and plans, is really very much a reflection of the committed professional and expert staff we have on our team. And our team is really very, very much committed to continuous improvement and innovation. And although the reaccreditation effort really began when we were last accredited 5 years ago, a few special acknowledgements to staff who were so instrumental in getting us across the finish line this time. And I'd like to acknowledge and thank Tony Esparza, who really led the final push along with Colin Walker, as well as Shelley McVeigh and Shelley Brittingham. So thank you for the opportunity to celebrate our accreditation with you and to acknowledge the value this brings to the city. Next slide, please. I guess that's the end. Thank you very much.
Is that your end of your report, Mr. Miyake?
Yes, it is, Mayor. Thank you.
All right. Well, that's excellent, Mr. Shiosaki. It doesn't happen automatically, and to have achieved a perfect score is quite incredible. So keep up the good work, please. Thank you. Okay, so on to our consent calendar. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. All right, so we have a very busy meeting tonight. As you know, we're going to start off with one study session item. Mr. Miyake, would you like to introduce?
Yes, Mayor, thank you again. As you mentioned, we have one study session topic on your agenda this evening, and it's with regard to initiation of work plans associated with House Bill 1590. By way of background, this topic was in front of Council on October 12th, where Council adopted a resolution allowing the city to collect 0.1% of sales tax for purposes of affordable housing and related services. At that meeting, Council directed staff to return to a future Council meeting with a work program executing the use of this tax. Tonight, staff will focus on elements of the work plan, and it seeks feedback on these elements as well as it seeks Council direction to initiate the work plans itself. So joining us this evening is our Matt Cummins, the Director of Community Development, as well as Michael Shiosaki, Director, and Tony Esparza, Assistant Director of the Parks and Community Services Department. With that, I'm going to go over and turn it over to Mac to begin the presentation. Mac.
Thank you, City Manager Miyake, and it's good to be back with you all this evening, Mayor and members of the Council. We're embarking on a pretty exciting effort here to make significant change and be able to implement big parts of the city's affordable housing strategy and human service policy implementation in the community. As City Manager Miyake mentioned, in October, you all voted to exercise the city's rights under what's known as House Bill 1590, which collects the 0.1% sales tax starting on January 1st of next year and going forward. So what we're going to do tonight is walk you through the work plan and what you can expect going forward. And we plan to try to be back to you fairly frequently, no less than once a month, going until the council's ready to make priorities and start allocating the funds. So Tony, if we can go to the next slide. Tonight, the specific direction that we're looking for from the council includes really just initiation of that work plan. And what we're going to walk through tonight are the four main components of the work plan. We're going to start with a discussion around an interest statement of policy and policies that have already been adopted. We're going to talk about what our approach to outreach and regional collaboration regarding implementing the overall goals of 1590 are within the city of Bellevue and how we're going to partner with other outside agencies to that end. We'll spend a little bit of time talking about the different buckets of funding and where funding prioritization may go as allowed under 1590. And then we'll talk about timing and decision-making over the next probably 4 to 6 months. So let's go to the next slide. So in order to organize ourselves for tonight's discussion, we thought we would start with a discussion around existing policy and this idea of an interest statement or a statement of purpose around 1590. One of the things that we have learned as we have started this discussion is that the city, well, I should say we knew this, but many people in the public did not. We have a lot of existing policy that's very supportive of the implementation measures you're going to be taking up relating to this funding source. There are a number of different things in the comp plan, in the human services policies and needs assessment, in the affordable housing strategy, and a variety of other regional policies that the city has adopted. And we're going to walk through how we plan to weave those together for you. And then we're going to specifically talk about the continuum of care model and how that is contemplated in terms of its role of building a complete community within the city of Bellevue. And then more specifically, the role of housing in that community, a continuum of care model. So that will hopefully set up for an opportunity to have a discussion with you all about the various funding opportunities that 1590 and the associated sales tax funds allow for. And then lastly, we'll move into the human service needs and where that program is likely to go as a result of having this extra funding source. And then we'll wrap up talking about all the folks we tend to go talk or are going to go talk to about partnering with. So Tony, let's go to the next slide. Our intent in this work plan will be to come back to you with at least one study session on each of the main topical items I referenced before. We're going to start with the interest statement, which is really just this intersection of all the existing policies from the different places I mentioned a minute ago. That'll be your first study session in January, and we're going to weave together all of those different policies so that the community can see where the 0 to 30% AMI populations and then 30 to 60% AMI populations, as well as the human services that may be fundable. The city's already adopted a number of policy statements relating to wanting to help in those areas. So look for that as your first study session in January. And then I'm going to hand it off to Tony now to start talking about some of the continuum of care model.
Thank you, Director Cummins. I appreciate that. And thanks everyone for letting me be here with you this evening. House Bill 1590 provides the option of funding for several areas that city policy has already identified as interconnected. Within the Human Services chapter of the city's comprehensive plan, it's noted that prevention and early intervention services are critical, quote, upstream strategies that avert more costly remediation later. Upstream strategies refer to actions that seek to find the cause of a potential problem and intervene before it occurs or before it worsens. Upstream strategies not only help prevent future crises, they reduce the need for more costly intervention later. It is an ongoing challenge to provide services for serious crisis-oriented issues that need attention in the present, while also making strategic investments in prevention and early intervention services. The Human Services Continuum model that is already in place seeks to strike that appropriate balance. Affordable housing and mental or behavioral health services, which are the areas that are potentially funded by House Bill 1590, can both serve as preventative, upstream services that can keep residents from becoming homeless and can also provide them with the necessary support to maintain their housing in the future. While almost all of the human services policies found within the city's comprehensive plan provide support for the potential funding allocations provided by 1590, I would call attention to 5 policies that are particularly relevant. Human Services Policy number 3 identifies the need to fund preventative services, which could include affordable housing and mental and behavioral health. Human Services Policy 4 states the city's intent to fund the entire continuum of care. Human Services Policy 8 supports the funding of services to those who are disproportionately affected by poverty, discrimination, and victimization, which corresponds with the specific populations identified for the use of $1590 for affordable housing. House Bill 1590 identified these certain populations to be served by affordable housing constructed with these dollars: persons with behavioral health disabilities, veterans, senior citizens, homeless or at risk of being homeless families with children, unaccompanied homeless youth or young adults, persons with disabilities, or domestic violence survivors. Human Services Policy 12 prioritizes the coordination of services with others, and Human Services Policy 15 provides for a distribution of services throughout the Bellevue community, all supportive of what we are considering with House Bill 1590. Director Cummins will share more with you now about the affordable housing component of 1590.
Thank you, Ms. Esparza. We wanted to spend a little bit of time at tonight's meeting, and again, we'll get into much more detail when we get to the next study session, but we wanted to talk a little bit about the affordable housing need, and then the funding gap that currently exists and where we've traditionally spent the limited dollars we have around the creation of affordable housing. And then that'll dovetail nicely into how 1590 may solve and create a funding stream for that population and AMI levels that we've not been able to fund as well as we would have liked. So there are a number of existing affordable housing policies relating here. And I think one thing we would want to note, affordable housing is becoming one of the most talked about public policy issues in the community by far each year. It's coming up in many different areas. It comes up in our business surveys as being a significant concern. We spent a lot of time talking about that as part of our economic development plan. As Mrs. Esparza mentioned, it's coming up in our human services work. In fact, 75% of the respondents are now saying affordable housing is the #1 concern, on their list. It comes up in our discussions with the Chamber of Commerce and a number of other different formats. So as we start talking about this, the 1590 populations that Mrs. Esparza was just mentioning specifically have to serve those specific populations making 60% AMI or less. And I'm going to show a few graphics here about what that really means. So if we go to the next slide. What I really want to draw your attention to on this slide is that many Bellevue populations are severely cost burdened as it relates to paying for housing costs in the city. And when we get through a few more slides, you'll see that what's missing is housing choice, and particularly housing choice at the lower income levels. The fact that over 1/3 of our senior renters are spending more than 50% of their income on housing gives a sense of where some of our most sensitive populations are. And as we dig more into this and start talking about the types of units we're going to create over the next couple study sessions, we'll start to hone in on how we plan to create these units in the continuum of care model that Mrs. Esparza was referencing earlier. Let's go to the next slide. We thought we might start with a broad discussion around what 0 to 30% AMI looks like. And there are a number of jobs in the community that fit within 0 to 30% AMI. And these are individuals that are very much potentially at risk for being homeless as a result of being paycheck to paycheck. And so when we start to look at the continuum of care model and start to think about not just 0 to 30, but 30 to 60% AMI, and what types of jobs and what types of workers fit within those categories, we're going to try to stitch that together and work through this with you all in terms of prioritization around different types of housing that may be able to be created under the 1590 revenue stream. Let's go to the next slide. So it's always useful, I think, to use some real data. The current median single family home sales price in the city is $1.4 million. That's an obviously very, very large number. The Bellevue median rent last month was at $1,860 for a 1-bedroom apartment and $2,400 for a 2-bedroom apartment. In a couple of slides here, I'm going to revisit those numbers to help articulate the gap between what those AMI levels allow for a non-cost burdened household and what it actually costs. And that's where the 1590 revenue stream may help us and allow us to subsidize the units down to an affordable price. So we go to the next slide. So we've spent quite a bit of time talking about the affordable housing strategy. I think the only thing I want to reference here is that the affordable housing strategy contemplates the entire spectrum of housing and needing housing at the lower AMI levels. What we've always acknowledged is that most of our land use policy and funding strategy, simply because of how much it costs to subsidize units, generally has been at the 80% level and sometimes down to the 60% level. And we've only done a few projects that have a few units at less than that. So the opportunity to have a funding source specifically dedicated around less than 60% AMI dovetails nicely into the overall affordable housing strategy, because we've always contemplated wanting to create these kinds of units. Let's go to the next slide, Tony. This slide I find to be very useful to walk through what it looks like to try to create housing in the maximum affordable rent. So if you look at the two right columns and look at 2-bedroom units or as many as a 4-person household, a 30% AMI household can spend a maximum of little under $850 a month in rent. So if you consider a 2-bedroom apartment market rate at $2,400, you're talking about a couple $1,000s worth of gap between the two. And even at the 50% AMI level, you're talking about $1,000 in gap between the maximum rent you're allowed to pay and still qualify as non-cost or house burdened and what the typical market rent is. So as we work through what the actual numbers are and the cost subsidy per unit, there's going to be a lot of options here, and we're going to start to talk about what some of those are. But there's no question there is a need in Bellevue at the lower population, at lower AMI levels, and specifically for those populations that Mrs. Farza was just referencing. So if we jump to the next slide, we'll be updating this slide when you get into your significant study session work. But what this slide articulates is a number of the different job classifications that we had shown earlier, and then dashed lines across the slide that show where the different AMI levels. So for example, 50% AMI for a family of 4, you see nearly 2/3 of the job classifications not qualify, and there's a gap there. So obviously what we're seeing is the lower income populations are in desperate need of housing in the community. And so the opportunity to potentially bridge that gap is something that 1590 may allow us to do. Jump to the next slide. So we want to spend a few minutes talking about the different funding opportunities. One is going to be the mental and behavioral health services and the various opportunities to fund those things through our Human Services Commission allocation process. I'm going to set that to a side for a minute because I'm going to hand it back to Mrs. Farza after I talk about the capital and construction side. But I want to talk, can we go to the next slide? So we're identifying 2 different buckets of money that potentially can be spent on the creation of affordable housing or housing related services. And those 2 buckets will look something like this. So at your last study session, you asked us to look into or start looking into different processes and how it might work to allocate the funds. A policy issue that came up related to how we might be able to serve Bellevue populations first in the short term and what that might look like. We're still researching that, and a number of you have given us topical areas that you would like us to look into. So I'll be happy to continue that work. And when we get to this study session a month or 2 down the road, we'll have all the information you'll need to start to identify your prioritization. But the 2 buckets will look like this. One will be City of Bellevue funds only, or those monies that could be packaged with other funding sources that don't have color of money restrictions relating to specific populations that can be served. And then the other bucket of money would be what we're calling right now a leveraged sources of money. That process involves using a variety of monetary sources: State Housing Trust Fund, King County money, federal money, ARCH money, low-income housing tax credits, and a host of others. It's typically how we've participated in affordable housing construction and subsidy in the past. There are some things that we already know about that process. It's a once-a-year process that's run through ARCH. Virtually everybody involved in the affordable housing industry knows about it. Usually there are more units created, and at a lower subsidy cost per unit. But when we use multiple funding sources, each one tends to have a set of requirements that comes with that funding source. And so as you all work through your prioritization, there'll be an opportunity to talk about how much money you'd like to put in each pot and why. And when we get to the outreach component, we'll talk about how we're going to help do some thinking about that. And then the last thing I want to mention is there have been a number of questions about debt issuance and whether or not we should consider issuing debt. And the answer is yes, we should consider issuing debt. And we're going to study how and why it would make sense. And come back to you all. And so we're doing quite a bit of work with our finance department about what a debt issuance might look like, what a partial debt issuance might look like, or whether or not we should just stay with an annual revenue stream. And much of that's going to have to do with how many real projects there are in the short term and which ones we're ready to fund right now. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Mrs. Esparza to talk about the human services pot of money.
Thank you. So in speaking of mental and behavioral health services, which was another allowable funding option with HB $1590, I want to point back to our 2019-2020 Human Services Needs Update. And when discussing homelessness, it was specifically stated that there is a need to focus services on the root causes of homelessness to try to address it. And mental and behavioral health services were identified as amongst the primary root causes contributing to homelessness. So the correlation between the need for more affordable housing and the need for added mental and behavioral health services is clear. Both contribute to the likelihood of an individual maintaining or achieving housing stability. The needs update also identified the significant need for more of these services and addressed the shortage of these services in the community, especially for low-income households. In addition, in the recent Human Services funding cycle, the Human Service Commission recommended approximately $868,000 be allocated to mental and behavioral health and housing-related services for 2021. And yet this does not come close to meeting the overall need in these areas in the community. It is also worth noting that the housing and mental and behavioral health needs have been some of the most noted needs due to the pandemic. And as we work to begin the 2021-2022 Human Services Needs Assessment, we only anticipate that these needs will have increased in our community as we speak to both residents and providers. An additional area we wanted to speak with you about this evening as a topic for our work plan is regional collaboration and outreach. As it relates to mental and behavioral health, we will be working to identify programs that are not yet funded by the City of Bellevue, yet may serve diverse members of our community in culturally responsive ways. We will also be working with our currently funded providers to determine the capacity for service expansion. In addition, we'll be exploring opportunities to expand same-day services amongst all providers, as this is a critical gap in our community. And we will continue to collaborate with other Eastside funders, county funders, and federal funders to coordinate allocated dollars to fill gaps that do not have another identified funding source. Director Cummins will share with you more about the collaboration and outreach that will take place in regards to affordable housing.
Thanks. So our approach here will be to reach out to a whole host of different entities, our colleagues intergovernmentally at the various agencies, various nonprofit developers, everyone that we have partnered with in the past in terms of funding projects. Mayor, you asked, and we will be reaching out to like the South King County Housing Collaborative Group. Certainly we do a lot of work with ARCH. Our intent here is to understand where we can partner with, so like at the last study session, questions about how we could partner with King County came up. We've already started some staff dialogue there, and if council authorizes the initiation of the work program tonight, we'll get going in earnest on that. We've reached out to their housing and human service folks, and we're getting queued up for some discussions with Arch and our other partner agencies. So our primary intent is to come back with an idea of what types of projects are real in the short and medium term. What role can the city play in helping bridge that funding gap and or the public subsidy that would be necessary to get the unit affordable down to the 30% AMI or 60% AMI level? Couple of things that a couple of our council members have already brought up and we are going to be looking into relating to is there an opportunity to look at mixed income buildings and whether or not 1590 is a good funding source to do that. Geographic dispersion of projects within the city, not having any one particular neighborhood be where you may see more projects of 60% and lower AMI. And then ultimately start to hone in on that question of what are the early wins and how quickly can we start to come to market and help fill this need. So if we go to the next slide, we'll start to talk about next steps. As I mentioned early on, we anticipate study sessions every 3 to 5 weeks, depending on rhythm with the city council and the policy issues that you all take on, and if we can get clear consensus and direction on those policy issues. We're planned to immediately begin public outreach in the collaboration that Mrs. Sparza and I have been mentioning. And then we're gonna start work, because the very first study session would be on the policy interest statement, which we would imagine starting in January, and then as council works through that, be ready for adoption so you can all adopt a document when you're finished with that. And then we'll be starting to talk about the different funding opportunities. So if we go to the next slide, the actual request of council this evening for direction is to initiate the work plan to include those elements that we mentioned, the interest statement, the outreach and collaboration approach, the funding prioritization and categories and timing. And I think what would be best from Mrs. Sparza and I's standpoint, if there are topical areas that you think our staff should be looking into, so we can make sure that we are ready for your much more detailed discussions at each of the study sessions you're going to be having to work through all those topical things we've just mentioned, that would be super helpful. And then with that, we'll stop and we're happy to answer any questions the council has.
Thank you so much. Great presentation. I'm going to call on council members in this order. Councilmember Stokes, Deputy Mayor Newhouse, Councilmember Zahn, Robertson, Barksdale, Lee, and then me. So starting with Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, thank you very much. Really great presentation. I really enjoyed the briefing we had and the discussion, and appreciate also the your willingness to have back and forth communications and talking about things and how do we do this and that. And I'm excited about your ingenuity and your obvious commitment to making this happen. We're in a very, very, I think, good opportunity period to do something on this. And it's, as I said before, in this whole time of crisis, we're actually given an opportunity to move things forward that we might not have had so quickly. So we'll work on that. The only thing I like the approach, and I'm looking forward to seeing that, and I appreciate your coming back often. Also, I think one of the best I've heard so far in my years on the council of pulling together from different policy statements, different documents and all, a cohesive approach. And, going back to the Affordable Housing Task Force, going back to other stuff we've been doing, all of that is, or the Affordable Housing Strategy is very good, pulling those together. So that synergy, I think, is very important. The one thing I would like to add on in terms of regional collaboration, and I'm glad you're talking to King County. We're trying to, with the Regional Policy Committee and other things, get King County to talk to us. So maybe between those two, we'll really start working on some things that are positive. Is also, and we can talk about this later, but I think the outreach to our cities around us. We're already working with them through Arch, we're working through other things, but this is a regional problem. It's not just Bellevue. and we have a lot of people who work here and in other cities and people coming in. So we could expand, in a sense, our ability to address these issues, at least explore that. So I would, like you think about looking at the cities around us who are also working on these issues, because I think some innovative things are happening there, and that'll be good. And lastly, I really appreciate the focus on equity. I mean, this is about equity. It's about equity of people who are from income, from race, from circumstances. It's serving all the people in Bellevue and making it clear that Bellevue is addressing the issues, the needs, and all our citizens, and that will end up building a much stronger Bellevue and a stronger economy in the long run, and really help people, and particularly reaching out to the agencies that have come on board in the last few years that we haven't been dealing with, traditional agencies, and working with them as well. So I'm excited about it. I really appreciate it and looking forward to continuing. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, Mac and Tony, thanks for the great presentation. And thank you so much for moving so quickly on this. I mean, we just literally took a vote on this not too long ago. We're already getting our first presentation, and we're going to move forward very quickly on this. So thank you for that. Much appreciated. Boy, lots of different options here. I think you did a great job just kind of outlining what some of those options look like. Certainly, I am in favor of the work plan going forward as it relates to that interest statement, to the outreach and the regional collaboration opportunities. I think that's something that, as Councilmember Stokes just pointed out, something we want to be aware of, and some things we might want to take advantage of. The funding prioritization, certainly, that debt issuance is very intriguing, and I think there's multiple ways we can, look at different options there. So really prefer to get, some more details on that before we make any specific recommendations on that. But very interesting, and then the timing as well. So this is a great work plan moving forward. I guess the one thing that I would just comment on is I think part of the reason we took this vote was that I think we as a council of the city feel like we can identify some of those opportunities very quickly, and that we can keep that $9 million in Bellevue, and we can specifically help Bellevue residents. So while I'm interested in a regional approach, I also want to make sure we keep an eye on helping those directly in Bellevue with this affordable housing, with these affordable housing units, and making sure that we can get them into those units. So, but again, very excited about this moving forward. And again, thank you so much for moving so quickly on this.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, I too echo my former colleagues' comments about this. I mean, moving with urgency is so important. And I agree that we want to look at the funding gap needs. So the part that I would really like to understand is, as we think about the 0 to 60 that the funds are allowing us to leverage, is it more challenging to build up to the 30%? So that's where more of this funding should be? Or should we be focusing more on the 30 to 60%? And also what I really like is the fact that you talked about the fact that we also want to be nimble and flexible. So it may be that the first X number of years, we're focusing more on a certain percentage of AMI. And then as time goes on, we may see a gap in another area. So we might focus more on those areas. The regional collaboration, I think, is very, very important because we are not a bubble in Bellevue. So as we look at regionally affordable housing, it's better for Bellevue as well. My question would be this. On the bonding on revenue and debt issuance, I understand and agree that we don't want to be too premature in looking at that debt issuance. But if we do identify some opportunities through, let's say, the C1 policy on affordable housing, what's the time frame from the time that we say that we do have a need for these dollars to when funds would be available? Because I'd like to make sure that that we have the funding in case if we need it, so we're not actually identifying some property acquisition opportunities and then realizing, oh, we don't actually quite have enough money and it might take X number of months to actually amass the funds. Thank you.
I can answer a couple parts of that. I will defer to the finance department and we'll have to get back to you on a typical debt issuance. We are keeping our eyes on all of possible affordable housing solutions right now. So if something were to become available, we do have CIP funds and other things that could potentially be a backfill source in the short term. The 1590 funds themselves are collected in arrears and they don't start until January 1st. So there isn't actually any money to be spent until probably the end of the first quarter at the earliest anyways. So as we're working through this question with you all, we'll be keeping an eye on all of those factors. And that's probably right about the time you're going to be having the debt issuance conversation that you're alluding to right now.
Okay, and then my other question is, I don't see anything in here about looking at our codes, but I'm wondering as we think about affordable housing, whether some of these funds could also be used to look at how our codes may create some barriers or what code provisions we might want to make to allow different kinds of housing that may be a slightly different construction method than what the codes currently contemplate.
So on that, council members, on without being premature, as you take up the budget later, there is another staff person in the budget as a limited time employee specifically contemplated to work on the remainder of the affordable housing strategy work, which includes a lot of the code work you're describing. And there's a host of things that as we've been doing the MFTE and C1 things that have a little bit lagged behind, our intent is as soon as we get that other person on board, we'd be very aggressive looking at the items you're talking about.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Robertson.
Thanks. I'll join my colleagues in saying how excited I am and how pleased I am at how quickly our staff has gotten organized and come to us. Granted, we have done a lot of work trying to figure out the affordable housing strategy. So this is just one more tool we can use to implement that and go big, really. To me, one, I'm supportive of launching. That's the question you asked us. To me, I think that there's really kind of three things I want to focus on. One is making sure we have the right outreach. Second is making sure we have analysis so we know which types of projects and which types of tools are best to use to generate the most number of units, if you will. And third, I think we should focus on early wins. We don't want this money just accumulating. We want to do something that's going to bring units online ASAP. So for outreach, I know that I had encouraged staff to get the Planning Commission together with the technical advisory group that helped with the affordable housing strategy as they're working on the land use code for the C1. I don't know if we need to get the whole TAG group together, but there's a couple of fee developers that were part of that group that have built affordable housing and they know how it works. I think they could be a great resource, and I would gather that they would be absolutely happy to provide input because we want to see more units built. So for outreach, like I said, the TAG group, I think we should do outreach generally to fee developers, maybe to the chamber and BDA, as well as to the nonprofit developers and the other non-governmental organizations and local government partners. And the reason I'm focused on people who are actually developing is there are people building housing in Bellevue today. And maybe some of them are using the MFTE, maybe some of them are using land use incentives to build affordable housing. But if we could use some of these funds to make sure that every development that goes in has some units that are affordable at 60% by buying down affordability with those folks, I think that would be a real win. We have a ton of development going on right now, including transit-oriented development, which could easily be, assuming people want to take money from the city to make these some of those units affordable, it could be a really great opportunity where we immediately deliver a bunch of units. Like I said, construction's going right now. To me, the success will be shown if we have a dispersion of units, both within market and other affordability rates projects, but also across the city. We don't want to concentrate a whole bunch of only 60% and below or 30% and below units in one area. Mixing them in with, 60, 80, 120 market, I think would be a real success. Within the project and across the city. Finally, I think that we can use some of this money for preservation if those opportunities come around. I think that this helps us be nimble. I think that that's really great. That could be some early wins as well. And also, we had some comments from the public about funding and development of the CFH shelter and the Plymouth housing, supportive housing. I'd love to see how we can partner with them with some funding to make sure that we get a project that really works well for our city. So I think that is one of the things that would be very helpful to do. I'm glad that you're planning to come to us regularly, because I know that all 7 of us are very interested in this topic and want to make sure that we weigh in. We hear from you, we hear from the public, we hear from different stakeholders as we move along. So I'm looking forward to figuring out the best way to use this money when it starts coming in. So thanks.
Okay, Councilmember Barksdale.
All right, thank you, Mayor. And thanks again to staff for, as my colleagues have mentioned, for bringing this back so quickly and for the holistic view, at least in the planning of thinking about the work plan to support moving it forward. Building on previous comments, one of the things that I think would be interesting to also have is as a topical area are outcomes that we will use to measure success. So as we're talking through the different options, and I know this is also partially covered by Councilmember Robertson's comment about the analysis, but being able to see how that plays relative to the outcomes. So I don't know I think part of this is us discussing the outcomes, and I know some of that comes from past policies, but there might be other outcomes that we might want to consider, and then being able to evaluate it against those. And the second piece is, in addition to thinking about number of units, I'd also like to think about number of people served.
Great. Councilmember Lee.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, as we all know, Bellevue is such a desirable place for people to come to live and work. Housing has always been very expensive. And so affordable housing, by whatever definition, it's always a challenge. So I'm really glad that, finally lots of attention is put on it, and it's going to, something's going to happen to look at it. And this money that we're getting, the sales tax, to me, is a godsend. It's a wonderful opportunity that we can do something. And the only thing, I really appreciate the staff coming up with lots of ideas, jumping at it. When we have $9 million, say, to spend, and if we can especially even leverage it, it's a lot of incentive and the capability for us to do something that we all believe it's necessary. The only thing I want to make sure is that I appreciate the eagerness we were jumping on it. We need to be prudent. Bellevue has been well served in the past because we don't just jump on things, because the money's there. We don't. Bellevue, we take care of our financial needs. We, always can. The people, the public, always are willing to support, the things that we need with their tax money. And so just because we have the money here, we should be prudent. We should not rush to spend it. We should make sure that we do it right. And I agree, even what's earlier said by a number of people, that we need to do something even bold. Absolutely. We're already behind, so it never hurts to catch up. However, we need to be deliberate, and the devil is in detail. So I agree with most of the things that have been talked about, but we need to be sure that we do it right, do it the Bellevue way. We, as we mentioned, we can identify, and we already have, in fact, we have affordable housing policy, and we can do more aggressively. Absolutely, we can take with the money we have. We can be more nimble. We can take advantage of opportunities, and we talk about outreach. The people that we have, like Imagine Housing, Arch, they are all being. We just mentioned also CFHL. Mr. Doug Wheeler mentioned mental health challenges, and they know that prevention is a very important part of, housing problem is to provide people with stable community environment So mental health, drug abuse, all these are important issues that we have people that already knows how to handle them. So many things we don't have to recreate the wheel. We can do it with the people that we can do. But absolutely, we can do more. We can do more aggressively. We can address situations we cannot. Looking at 50% AMI, that's very good. If it's something we cannot do, this opens up the opportunity for us to do it. And we have developers that can help us. One example I was wondering is, there's been some ideas, economic development. Maybe Mac can address that. Is there some kind of tax advantage, economic development zone? I don't know whether Bellevue can qualify for that. It's to build lower income affordable housing units. So I don't know whether Bellevue can be a potential location, but you can maybe address later when I'm done. Okay, another one that I've been watching TV in Seattle. Somebody also mentioned Seattle in such a bad shape, and the way they address homelessness. And there's some kind of idea was suggested, some kind of hope house or something. So when you put people in those homeless facilities, you don't just put them there, but you actually have a program, have expectations, have ways, to treat them so that they can come out whole and they can afford to build themselves into, affordable housing occupants. I think these are the things that we really should look hard and look at. And now with the money we have, and if we have a good idea, good program, good things to do, the right things to do it the right way for the east side, for Bellevue, and the way Bellevue handles its problems. In that case, we can leverage the money, but just to leverage money for the sake of getting more money, I would have questions about that. But if we have good projects, good things to do, good opportunities to seize, absolutely. If the finance works out, if the money is cheap, we can leverage, we should consider the opportunity that's presented to us. So also the last question, I've asked one about the economic zone. The second question is there a time limit to spend the money? So do we have to be in a rush if we don't spend it, because we are looking very diligently? Is any money timeline? So 2 questions, Mac. Thank you.
I can certainly answer the second question, Councilmember Lee, because there may be some questions out there about this. No, there's not a sunset clause in the way you're used to seeing it, like for 10 years or so forth. As we help you work through the debt issuance question, obviously there will be a timing component to that versus the ongoing revenue stream.
Yes. The first question about the economic zone, are we qualified or do we have any opportunities for taking advantage of that?
We'll look into that for you.
Thank you.
A lot of the tax advantages come from things like the multifamily tax exemption as compared to the economic development tax things, but we'll take a look at it.
Thanks. Thank you.
Good job. Yeah, thank you for this presentation. I personally feel like we have to get moving on this so quickly. We are at such a crossroads before our community starts growing with increased employees. And we already have so many people who can barely afford to live here. And now with COVID, it's even more so that way. So if we want to maintain the community we have and then have positive growth with the coming up in the next few years, we have to have, as Tony, you described, that spectrum of affordabilities in Bellevue so people can move it up and down the affordability ladder and not try to move down and not be able to find any housing and have to leave the community, or as many do, just go homeless, try to stay here, especially if they have children in the school district. So my priorities are going to be that prevention that you talk about. And I think the best way of doing that is to house our homeless Bellevue School District children. We have over 350 children who are considered homeless right now. And it is such a top priority as far as I'm concerned to get them into stable housing so that they can learn, so that they can move on in their lives and get a good education. And you can't learn if you're not in stable housing. So if we want to make sure that the cycle's not repeated, we need to make sure that those kids get into stable housing. So that's my first priority. I think having that continuum of care and prevention is really good that you described. I'm all in support of that. I like the variety of the affordabilities that you're describing. We know, and Tony said this so well, but we know you cannot get below 60% AMI without injecting funding into it. And we have this wonderful affordable housing strategy that's been very difficult to implement because we haven't had the budget to implement at the lower levels. And this 1590 gives us the opportunity to start implementing our plan and make it really robust. We did talk, Tony, you did mention the same need for the same day services. I think that's critical. I agree with our comment, Mr. Leetoff, talking about the need for the services to support the population we're trying to work with. And I think same day services are essential in that. So really hoping we can get more of those programs in Bellevue. And very interested to see what you recommend that we do to maintain a regional partnership. So I'm not opposed to contributing more to ARCH and even to the South King County version of ARCH, which is SKIP, because they've kind of lost our tax base to generate funding for their programs. So I'm fine with some sort of recommendation to contribute back into those programs. So I'm looking forward to the next step. Really am excited, and I appreciate my fellow council members' comments on this. Do you feel like you have enough direction to move forward and come back in a few weeks?
Yes, Mayor, I think that's plenty sufficient, and we'll be ready for the first dialogue around the policy interest statement sometime in mid-January-ish.
Great. So you're going to initiate the work plan as proposed and consider the comments you received tonight and come back then?
Yep.
Okay, terrific. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now we're into the tricky stuff. Have grace with us as we get through this because there's a lot to get through. It's all important, but there's all these different categories and ways we're going to do it. So we're going to start with 6 ordinances. And Mr. Miyake, did you want to introduce this? We're going to take each one individually, but I think we're going to do one major staff presentation and then take each one independently as a vote. So we'll go through the first 6, but go ahead, Mr. Miyake.
Yeah, you got it, Mayor. Yeah, there are 6 ordinances here, and they're related to the amendments to the city's comp plan. And by way of background, on November 16th, the City Council heard recommendations from the Planning Commission and staff on 4 privately initiated and 1 city-initiated comp plan amendments. And at that meeting, the council directed staff to bring these amendments back to council for formal adoption this evening. So joining us this evening is Emil King, Assistant Director, and Tara Johnson, Comprehensive Planning Manager, both from the Community Development Department, to just provide a brief staff report before taking each one of these 6 ordinances up one at a time for adoption this evening, Mayor. So, Emil.
Thank you, City Manager Miyake, and good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of council. Tonight we're here to do the adoption of the 4 privately initiated comprehensive plan amendments, as well as the city-initiated amendment. This is a routine adoption that happens annually. And for a bit of introduction, I'm going to hand it over to our comprehensive planning manager, Ms. Tara Johnson, to give an overview of the amendments and the process to date.
Thank you, Emil. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhouse, members of the council, staff present, and members of the public. As both City Manager Miyake and Emil have indicated, we're here this evening to come forward with 6 ordinances for your final action, and on the 2020 comprehensive plan amendments. We have 4 privately initiated amendments, and The privately initiated amendments go through a two-step process, the threshold review, which we came forward to City Council in earlier this year. Following that, we go through a final review process on the 4 privately initiated amendments. In addition to that, we also have one city-initiated policy amendment relating to the affordable housing C1 strategy, which City Council initiated in July as part of the 2020 work program. And all of those amendments went through the required process, legislative process, which requires a public hearing with the Planning Commission. We also had study sessions in advance of that. And following that, both staff and the Planning Commission chair came forward to City Council at your November 16th study session and provided an overview of the Planning Commission's deliberations and recommendations on all the 5 comprehensive plan amendment applications. And following that, we are here this evening to present the official legislative ordinances for your action. And I'm available here to answer any questions that council may have.
Okay, great. So do you don't have a PowerPoint to present on this?
I do have a PowerPoint. Should council wish me to walk them through the amendments?
How do you feel? I feel like I know them pretty well, but I don't know how the rest of the council feels. So if you'd like to see the PowerPoint, can you raise your hand? Otherwise, we can move forward. Okay, let's go ahead and take these one at a time, and we'll have Deputy Mayor make a motion, and we'll give you an opportunity to ask questions or make a comment if you'd like to. Otherwise, we'll just move to a vote and take them one by one. So Deputy Mayor, would you like to start?
Certainly, Mayor. I move to adopt Ordinance 6558, adopting the 100 Bellevue Way Southeast 2020 amendment to the comprehensive plan.
Second.
Okay.
Are there any questions or comments on this? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
I move to adopt Ordinance 6559, adopting the Glendale Country Club Northeast 2020 amendment to the comprehensive plan.
Second.
Are there any comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great. You know, I'm sorry, I just realized Councilmember Stokes is not with us right now. I wonder, so we're only getting 6 votes. I hate to call attention to that, but I think it's important that we all do this together. So,
Hey, Mayor, this is the clerk. I show that he's here.
yes, I see that, but I think he's logged on, but I don't think he's actually voting with us right now. So tell you what, I'm going to take a 5-minute break. We are going to come back at 7:40, and I will see you then. We've done 2, am I right? Let's go to the next one, Deputy Mayor.
Certainly, I move to adopt ordinance 6560, adopting the Northeast 8th Street Partners 2020 amendment to the comprehensive plan.
Are there any questions or comments?
I'll second.
Oops, any questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Councilmember Stokes, was that an aye from you?
You're on mute. Councilmember Stokes, you're on mute.
Can you raise your hand if you voted aye? Okay, terrific. That's 7 then. All right, let's move on to the next one.
I move to adopt ordinance 6561, adopting the Safeguard Self-Storage 2020 amendment to the comprehensive plan.
I'll second.
Any comments or questions on that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that passes 7-0. All right, next one.
I move to adopt ordinance 6562, adopting the C1 Affordable Housing Strategy 2020 amendment to the comprehensive plan.
Second.
Any comments or questions on that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and the next one.
I move to adopt ordinance 6563, adopting the city's 2020 amendments to the comprehensive plan as separately set forth in ordinances 6558, 6559, 6560, 6561, and 6562.
Second.
Any comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Okay, so now we're on to the next section. Mr. Miyake, would you like to introduce the next resolution?
Yes, item 12G is a resolution 9859 adopting an updated Bellevue Environmental Stewardship Plan. This matter was last in front of council on November 16th, where council directed staff to return with the updated plan for adoption this evening. Joining us this evening are Matt Cummins, the Director of Community Development, Emil King, Assistant Director, and Jennifer Ewing, Environmental Stewardship Program Manager, all from the Community Development Department for a brief staff report. With that, I will turn it over to the staff.
Thank you, City Manager Miyake and members of council. Tonight we're here for the adoption of our ESI plan update, and to kick things off, we have a brief presentation from our program manager, Ms. Jennifer Ewing.
Great, thank you. Let me just bring up the presentation. So good evening, Mayor. Hold on a sec. There we go. Okay. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis, and members of the council. We're pleased to present and give a brief report on the environmental stewardship plan and request action from the council to adopt the plan, and which will guide our environmental stewardship efforts over the next 5 years. We've presented to the council a number of times throughout the planning process, which we really began nearly 2 years ago with our progress report on our environmental stewardship efforts with the last environmental stewardship plan. And then through that process, engaged with the public on 3 different phases, updated the council at 6 different study sessions, and in total had engaged with over 1,000 residents, members of the business community, and other stakeholders. We were last before council on November 16th to present the recommended plan. At that study session, council provided direction for staff to make some edits to the plan and then return to adopt the plan. We did go ahead and make the edits that council requested, which are outlined in the agenda memo, namely to strengthen the section on public-private partnerships, address the how environmental stewardship can be incorporated into neighborhood area planning and neighborhood services, and also to reference some of the various local and other toolkits we've used in the development of the plan, which we've done. So, and tonight, again, we're looking for direction from council to adopt the plan.
Okay.
To give you just a quick overview of the plan and just to kind of recap some of the highlights. We do have 5 focus areas in the plan, consistent with the previous plan, but we've really looked to build on our work to date and outline a suite of 77 actions to implement over the next 5 years for both our city operations and also the community. We have developed a set of both short and long-term targets in the plan, the short-term targets being for 2030, and then the longer-term targets for our city operations are for 2040, and then for the entire community for 2050. At the back of the plan, we've included an implementation table where we outline the lead department and anticipated timeline for implementing the action. We've also outlined our monitoring and evaluation approach, which we also want to acknowledge that council's had some interest in having us come back quarterly to provide updates both on our progress towards our targets and then also the actual actions in the plan. And then we also have some longer term actions to consider in the plan, recognizing that this is a 5-year plan and we will continue to update it every 5 years and really continue to build on our work to achieve our goals. In terms of next steps, we are working on our work plan for 2021. As part of the budget process, just last week, there were 2 amendments, which we're working on incorporating into our work plan for funding for some quick win projects for the next couple of years, and then also for enhanced engagement strategies. We'll be working on doing some training and capacity building internally, identifying some quick win projects, and then shifting gears and getting ready for our first progress report in the spring. And so, yeah, to recap, we're excited to present this plan. It really represents over 2 years worth of work, involvement of dozens of city staff, other stakeholders in the community, and are requesting direction and action from council to adopt the plan this evening. And if there's any questions, we'd be happy to answer those. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Deputy Mayor, could you make a motion, please?
I certainly can. I move to adopt Resolution 9859, adopting the Bellevue Environmental Stewardship Plan.
Second.
Are there any comments or questions? All those in favor say aye. Oh, Councilmember Zahn, do you have a question or comment?
Yes, I have a quick question. So I know you mentioned the 2 amendments that we voted on last week. So is that actually incorporated within the plan, or it's already in, or you're intending to put it in? And that's both the enhanced engagement that Deputy Mayor had as an amendment, and then the focus on how do we get the most impactful early focus. So I'm just confirming that it's actually in there, because I tried to read through all the pages, but there were quite a few.
Councilmember Zahn, maybe I'll answer that question. So the answer is yes. The plan contains all the policies. The budgetary choices the council are making or allow us to be more aggressive in the first couple of years with implementation. So we are working right now on exactly which things we would fund right out of the chute with those extra funds.
Okay, so we're voting on the plan now, and then as part of the budget and the discussion of the coming back quarterly, we can talk about how quickly we can stand up the enhanced group that the Deputy Mayor had recommended. The sooner the better, so that they can help us with, as we are developing the implementation and the actions, right? So I'm just confirming that piece.
Right. So the budgetary choices later on in the evening contemplate some additional funds for outreach. And there's a host of things that may be used for. We would be working on that and bringing back those ideas as part of our quarterly progress update.
Okay, so that's where the urgency and the early wins would come from then. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, I just wanted to to mention in response to one of the speakers this evening, Court Olson, that you know, this is a plan in place. We've been working on this. It's a plan going forward, but it's a plan. And if we discover different things to do or want to accelerate or however working with the community, we can come back. So we do not need to delay this. We need to get it in place and start working on it. So I'm very happy to vote for it tonight.
Any other comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, that passes by 7-0. So now we're going to do 10, a batch of 10, and we'll have staff present on this and then we'll take them individually. So Mr. Miyake?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council members. As you mentioned, items 12H through 12R executes the Council's direction to staff provided since October and most recently on December 7th, which incorporates 9 amendments to the preliminary budget. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tony Call, our Director of Finance and Asset Management, for a brief staff report. Tony?
Thank you, City Manager Miyake, and Mayor and Deputy Mayor and Council members. It's a pleasure to see you once again. I have a very short staff report. You've heard us talking about the budget for 8 weeks now, so I'll keep this relatively short. Next slide, please. We actually started our discussions on the budget this year back in May and June, just as COVID was impacting our economy. And at that point, we found that we were projecting a severe deficit in the general fund. So on October 19th, the city manager presented his preliminary budget. Included in that preliminary budget that evening was a discussion on how we address the general fund deficit, but also included a discussion about the things that we made sure we didn't touch. So this budget before you maintains our public safety and our human services, and it largely keeps all of our staff here at the city. We also talked a little bit that evening about the investments that this budget makes, which was around homelessness and affordable housing and equity programs. The next series of meetings that were in front of you, October 26th, November 2nd, November 9th, and November 16th, all included presentations from staff regarding the various fees and responses to many of the council questions we received over those many weeks. The budget ordinances and resolutions before you this evening include the feedback that we received from all of those fee discussions. And so as you adopt the budget, all of those comments are included in those. On November 23rd, you held your third and final public hearing on the budget. We had quite a few people come and speak to us that evening. And after the public hearing, council provided staff with a series of budget amendments to be considered and brought back on December 7th. Last week, council looked at each of those budget amendments and gave direction to fund 9 of those amendments. All of those amendments are also included in the budget package that you will see this evening as we go through those 11 those 11 actions that will need to be taken. So tonight brings us to budget adoption. Next slide, please. In order to give a little bit of sense to the 11 items before you this evening, I've split them into kind of 4 areas. So the first 2 that you will take up will be regarding human services. It will adopt the Human Services Commission funding, as well as the implementation of the 2021 CDBG block grant funding. The next 5 ordinances in front of you are all fees and rates. Development services for 2021. There are 3 utility rate charges. All of those are for the biennium 21 and 22, water, sewer, storm and surface water, drainage charges. And then the 5th one on that list is the basic life support fee. Again, that has been updated from your discussion from December 7th. So that is included in the work before you this evening. The next 3 in the pink or the light purple color in front of you this evening are all property tax related. The first item will be a resolution to establish substantial need to allow us to adjust property taxes for the city of Bellevue only for up to the 1%. The next ordinance will actually implement the property tax rate for 2021. And then the third item actually provides us the ability to ensure that we've banked all of our excess tax capacity at the county. And then we get to the green one at the bottom, which is actually the umbrella ordinance. This actually adopts the budget. This will adopt appropriation by fund for 21 and 22. It actually also authorizes a 7-year CIP. It includes all of our pay plans and grants less than $90,000. So before you this evening is a total of 11 actions to adopt the budget. I thank you all for your active engagement, as you have done a very diligent and good job in a very challenging year. So thank you for your time this evening. With that, I will turn it back over to the mayor.
Thank you very much. So we will take those top 10 and do those one by one. And then we will do the what we call the umbrella there, which is the adoption of the entire budget or not. And I will give everybody, of course, a chance to speak to that when we get there. But right now we're going to do the human services, fees and rates, and property tax ordinances. And we'll start with Ordinance 6549. Deputy Mayor.
I move to adopt Ordinance 6549, adopting the Human Services Commission's 2021-2022 Human Services Fund funding recommendations.
Second.
Are there any comments or questions? I don't see council member. There she is. Okay. All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And that passes 7-0. Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
I move to adopt Ordinance 6550, adopting recommendations for the use of 2021 Community Development Block Grant funds as transmitted by the Human Services Commission.
Second.
Are there any comments or questions on that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That passes 7-0. All right, go ahead to the next one.
I move to adopt Ordinance 6551 regarding development services under the Bellevue City Code, fees for applications requiring construction, land use, fire, survey, transportation, utility, and clearing and grading review and inspection services.
Second.
Any comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That passes 7-0. Go ahead with the next one.
I move to adopt Ordinance 6552, establishing revised charges for water service, water consumption, and water standby capacity.
Second.
Any comments or question on that? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That passes 7-0. Go ahead with the next one.
I move to adopt Ordinance 6553, establishing revised sewerage service charges.
Second.
Any comments or questions on that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That passes 7-0. Go ahead with the next one.
I move to adopt Ordinance 6554, establishing revised storm and surface water drainage rates and charges for the storm and surface water utility of the city of Bellevue.
Second.
Any comments or questions on this? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That passes 7-0. Go ahead with the next one.
I move to adopt Ordinance 6555, amending Chapter 4.50, Section 4.50.010A of the Bellevue City Code to adjust the fee for basic life support emergency medical services transport.
Second.
Any comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes 7-0. Go ahead with the next one.
I move to adopt Resolution 9857, establishing substantial need under RCW 84.55.0101 to authorize the use of a limited factor for the tax year 2021 of the 101%.
Second.
Any comments or questions on that?
Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Lee,
Thank you.
go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and my esteemed colleagues. I've always had concern regarding this 1% property tax increase. I understand its purpose. However, my look at increasing any taxes need to be related to specific needs and use. And in this case, it's established for a potential revenue shortfall, and it's estimated, based on forecasts. So I believe that it is something that if we have a need for, we always have the ability, capacity, and the people of Bellevue will pay for it. And we have the capacity. We have lots of bank tax, property tax capacity. So I don't have any concern with not having enough money, especially we're looking at, approximately $500,000. And we have lots of places we can generate this amount of money if we need it. A couple of good example is one that's just discussed today. We did a refunding of our debt services, and we saved millions of dollars. And we have, godsend rainfalls, for grants we didn't even anticipate. So it's a lot of opportunities to handle this. So with this COVID-19, I think everybody in the community has gone through some tough times, and the city itself, employees, will tighten our belt. And I think the people, the property owners in Bellevue, deserve the recognition that they need the break. And this is the year they indeed need to have not required to pay this 1% property tax. It's not substantial. It's $9 a year for an average house, but it's a gesture I believe that we need to recognize. And especially as I emphasized before, if we don't have a cost benefit analysis for the money we spend, there's no reason we cannot justify it. So this is why I would not support this 1% property tax increase. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments or questions? I have a question. Tony, can you respond to Mr. Lee's comments there, Councilmember Lee, that we don't actually need to take this property tax increase, that we can easily get the money elsewhere?
Certainly. The preliminary budget before you does include the 1% property tax. The concepts that Mr. Lee was talking about earlier were more involved in the capital investment fund, whereas the property tax that we're looking at in here is really a general fund operations. It's what helps keep our actual operations of the city moving forward. So in this case, this property tax is really about the general fund.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments or questions? Okay.
You want to have another response, or you are satisfied? Since you mentioned about CIP and operating fund, we actually talk about moving money from CIP to operating when we need it. So that's another subject to be talked about separately. So thank you. So there's a way to do that. It's a matter of whether the city council wants to, make that, give it the direction. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you to respond to that again, because I think I already know the answer, but I'll let you say it. Tony.
Make sure it was directed at me, Mayor. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, this budget does do a one-time transfer to reallocate sales tax to from the general fund, from the CIP to the general fund. It is a one-time. It is a one-time event. It will go back to its traditional allocation starting in 2023. It's really to help us bridge the gap for COVID. So that is what the transfer is for.
Okay, thank you. I saw Councilmember Stokes with his hand up, and I saw Councilmember Robertson with her hand up as well. So Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, I think this is an appropriate tax. It's only pennies a month. We do have a deficit, and we're trying, particularly thinking about COVID, we're trying to do as much as we can to provide temporary emergency funding. This is a resource we have, and I think it's very appropriate under the circumstances. So I'm very much in favor of it.
Thank you. Councilmember Robertson.
Thank you. So a lot of cities don't even consider this an increase because it's just the it's less than inflation, and it's what you're allowed to do under state law. It used to be 6%, and then it was cut to 3, then to 2, then to 1. So it doesn't keep the buying power of our property tax even current with inflation. And we've known for a number of years before the COVID crisis that we were going to have a problem with our operating budget in the out years with regard to the costs of making sure that we have our police and fire and paramedics fully staffed so that they can respond to emergencies and other things that come from the general fund. I'm really proud of this budget, and I'll speak to that in the general umbrella ordinance, but I want to keep our police and firefighters in their jobs. We've done everything we can to keep it as thin as possible. This supports public safety. I support this. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Councilmember Lee.
Thank you. Since it's being discussed, more than expected, this has nothing to do with not supporting police and public safety. Absolutely. And this is, you know, we when I joined the council 20 some years ago, we taxed 6% increase every year. And since I got the council, a few of us decided that we need to be prudent, and we feel that the public deserves, you know, recognition of their support for the city's needs. So we did not increase any property tax for the next over 10 years or so. And King County and state of Washington follow Bellevue's example. So that's why we have a council requirement to approve property tax increase. So it's, yeah, that's not a magic. It's just a purely, when we need the money, can we afford to do it? And priority is what determines our needs. And so this is just, you know, a situation I'm talking about. It's nothing to do with not being responsible, not wanting to fund public safety. No, it just, we don't need to go into all that detail. I will talk about the budget when we get down to the end of the, the budget action. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, I was just going to speak and say that, you know, we're dealing with correct me if I'm wrong, Tony, a $16 million revenue shortfall for 2 years. And this 1%, we're talking about $613,000 per year. So as I look at the revenue shortfalls that we have, I think this is the time where, as tough as it is, that we are asking the community to take the 1%. And then next year, as we look at the mid-buy, if the revenue projections look much better and we actually get some federal relief from COVID, then we may be having a different discussion. But I believe that what we've seen is that we are not seeing Congress releasing funds directly to local cities that we've been pushing for since July. So at this point, I think that this is something we need to do. And then if things change and we actually get direct funding, then we're in a position of reassessing what we might want to do in future years. So that's where I am. Thank you.
I will just say that it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, before we even knew what COVID was, we had known that we needed to take this 1% property tax because of the trajectory of expenses versus revenues. So I think we're being very prudent in sticking with the plan and continuing to pay for the services that make Bellevue the city where we want to live and be. So that's my opinion. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, we will take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
No, respectfully.
All right, thank you. It passes 6-1. Okay, Deputy Mayor, Ordinance 6556.
I move to adopt Ordinance 6556, establishing the amount of property taxes to be levied for the year 2021, the first year of the City of Bellevue's 2021-2022 fiscal biennium.
Second.
Are there any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes 7-0. And then this is our last of this batch. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor, 9858.
I move to adopt Resolution 9858, providing for the banking of levy capacity pursuant to RCW 84.55.005, 84.55.0101, and 84.55.092.
Second.
Are there any comments or questions on this? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? That passes 7-0. And now this is our grand finale. This is our final budget. And Mr. Miyake, I'll let you introduce this for us, please.
Thank you so much, Mayor and council members. Ordinance 6557 adopts Bellevue's 21 to 22 operating budget and the 7-year capital program. This ordinance takes into consideration the various council amendments discussed and approved by the council. The budget the council is adopting this evening is the culmination of extensive work by both the council and staff. Preparing the preliminary budget in the middle of a pandemic was by no means an easy task. Delivering a budget that responds to the downturn in the economy yet maintains critical services to the community required creative and innovative thinking on the part of the staff and council working as a team together. This budget also sets in motion a strategy to begin responding to some of the city's longer-term financial issues next year, as you referenced, Mayor. I want to thank the staff, especially the city's executive leadership team, members, as well as the city council for all their hard work to get us to adoption of the budget this evening. With that, I'll turn it back to you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So I will let each of us speak. I'll call on you in order, but we'll start with a motion from the Deputy Mayor.
Certainly, I move to adopt Ordinance 6557, adopting the City of Bellevue's 2021-2022 budget and 2021-2027 capital investment program, setting forth the estimated revenues and appropriations and establishing job classifications and pay ranges.
Second.
Okay, so I'll call on you in this order, starting with Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis, then Council Members Barksdale, Robertson, Stokes, Zahn, Lee, and myself. Deputy Mayor, would you like to start us off?
Certainly, thank you, Mayor. Well, I hope my colleagues will join me in expressing our thanks to our city government's outstanding people, from the frontline staff to department heads who labor diligently every day, collectively working 24/7, 365 to keep Bellevue functioning and thriving. In particular, I want to thank all of our first responders who have done incredible work to provide critical services to ensure we are safe and healthy during this pandemic. I want to thank all the community members who participated in the budget process through boards and commissions, through comments directly to the city and the council. All these folks have helped frame this budget and the priorities therein. In particular, I want to thank Mayor Robinson for her leadership and City Manager Miyake and our Finance Director, Tony Call, for their tireless and outstanding work on this budget process. Lastly, I want to thank my colleagues for their willingness to work together to come up with compromises that everyone can stand by and support and move forward, not as 7 council members, but as one council. For me, the key theme for this budget process was keep Bellevue strong by moving Bellevue forward. As we all know, we are facing an ongoing pandemic, economic recession, and continued uncertainty. The 2021-2022 budget must adapt to these realities in order to bolster resiliency and position our community to recover swiftly. Our goal is to ensure Bellevue remains financially stable while maintaining current levels of core services and continuing capital investments that will add the capacity necessary to support projected growth. As the pandemic took hold and lockdowns took effect, Bellevue took measures to cut expenditures, many of them one-time and short-term fixes. So cost-cutting work will need to continue. But the primary focus on the 21-22 budget is to provide funds to continue to deliver those critical services during this unprecedented time. Public safety, public health, human services to protect those most vulnerable residents in our rapidly growing community, and maintaining basic infrastructure and funding to prepare us to meet those challenges of the significant growth that's coming to this remarkable and special city we call Bellevue. So this focus on our priorities is reflected in the budget. Maintains our funding levels of critical public safety programs related to our police and fire departments, continue to build the highest priority infrastructure needed to address growth, and provides for those new capital programs, including Vision Zero, transportation grants, economic development, public-private partnership implementation, preserved and increased funding for human services via community development block grant funds, adds funding for construction of congestion relieving transportation projects in our neighborhoods. And we have largely preserved current staff, but did reduce some budgets, use of consultants and professional services to support some very specific initiatives. I think our priorities are also reflected in the amendments to this budget as well. As we discussed last meeting, the Vision Zero timing, the Growth Corridor Pedestrian and Bike Project, the Community of Colors Coordinating Team, the Enhanced Stakeholder Group and Public Engagement, as well as quick early win actions for the Environmental Stewardship Initiative, the support of small businesses with the Bellevue Chamber and the Bellevue Downtown Association, the Bellevue College Connector, the Cross-Cultural Center Feasibility Study, and maintaining our fire training administrative assistant. These are all the very important amendments to all of us as a council. So the city still has challenges ahead to meet the rising demand for these core services while revenues may decline due to the pandemic. What is certain is that Bellevue must remain strong as a resilient city positioned for rapid recovery. I'm confident that Bellevue has the strength to rebound quickly and lead the way for economic growth, not only in the region, but in the state, and this budget will enable us to do just that. Thank you so much.
Great. Councilmember Barksdale.
All right, thank you, Mayor. I appreciate Deputy Mayor Neuenhouse's remarks. I think they were pretty robust and holistic in terms of, the value that comes from this budget process, and appreciate those comments. This is my first budget process, and I'll just say that although I don't have the historical context of how it was before, I imagine this was really a feat, just given all that's happening right now in our community and across the country. So I also just want to echo a sincere thanks to staff. I know the time that you put in to provide the information to us, but also all the background work that goes on to coordinate all the work across the departments. And I know that's a lot of work. Also want to thank the community as well. Really appreciate them coming out, spending their time, providing input into the budget process, sitting through our public hearings. I know that's always a fun thing to do from home. So I just appreciate the care and action there. And then also I want to thank my colleagues too for the time and the discussion. And I appreciate all the rallying around the work that needed to happen and the responding to the community's needs and interests. And I will say a special shout out and appreciation for really supporting the racial equity and the communities of color coordinating teamwork. I look forward to working with all of you on that in the coming year. Thank you.
Great. Councilmember Robertson.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'll join my colleagues, Deputy Mayor Neuenhouse and Councilmember Barksdale, in a very hearty thanks to everyone, and a special shout out to Tony and Brad and all the leads that helped bring this together. A lot happens ahead of time where the city manager is listening to the council, and we're listening to the community. He's listening to us before the budget is really rolled out. And the fact that we had, 8 amendments to the budget after it was rolled out is a testament to the level of engagement that the people drafting the budget had with us and with the community, and our engagement with the community, and taking that back so that it got cranked into the original proposed budget. So I think that that's great. And a special thank you to you, Mayor and Deputy Mayor, for your work on this. It's been a new environment this year. Certainly, it's been a while since we've had a down budget, and we've never done it in a Zoom environment before. So having to get this budget year up with challenging circumstances and challenging meeting from trying to find a new normal was really a huge effort. And so I know that we had from, Saber Schneider at Tech and Charmaine and Kyle from the clerk's office getting it all together, as well as, just everybody. It was a huge effort. The budget is really the #1 policy document of the council. It says what we value. And I think that this document shows that we value the people of Bellevue, and we value keeping our city a great place to do business and a great place to live. It is a very responsible budget, and it is a very responsive budget. Responsible because while we had a pretty major setback in our revenues, we took some cuts, but we made sure that we didn't cut the things that matter most to quality of life, like our public safety services, like our human services, so that the people who are suffering during the pandemic with job loss and business loss will have a safety net, like our affordable housing. And also it's responsible in that it takes into account the things that happened this year with COVID, but also the things that happened in terms of racial equity. So it addresses that. So I think it's a very responsible budget. It's very responsive because, again, it addresses those emerging issues. It incorporates public comment, it incorporates equity, inclusion, safety net, supporting business and the people. So it's both. And it really has no new revenue sources. The 1% is standard, and it has no other new revenue, general revenue sources. So, but we have to recognize this is a bridge budget. It's not going to do everything because our money is limited. And next year, the mid-buy is going to be a lot more like a budget year than it is going to be like a mid-buy year. We have a lot of hard decisions to make next year. I was looking through the council priorities, and I think this budget really captures it. There was one priority I'd like to ask the city manager to follow up on next year. And because we are cutting maintenance for parks and we're also deferring some major parks projects, that priority, council priority is number 12 under high quality built and natural environment. It says update the Parks and Recreation Master Plan to include an analysis of the level of service for a growing population and the creation of a financial strategy for those services. I'd like an update on that because I don't think we've looked at a financial strategy. And with the mid-buy next year, I think it's time to do it. And I think the council needs to keep that work because it's, you know, with having to cut the maintenance on parks and having to slow down some really important projects like Phase 2 Maidenbower, the public is going to really want to know that we are doing what we can to keep us not just a great place to live with great public safety and great businesses and great livability, but our city in the park. That's one of our mottos. So that's a follow-up request to the city manager. But I'm really proud of this budget, and I'm really proud of all of you. Some who it's their first budget, some who it's their Conrad is 28th or something. But you know, it took a lot of work together to get to one where we can vote unanimously on the budget. And so it's just, you know, I'm so proud to serve on this council and to adopt this great policy work that shares what we value. And what we value is the people of Bellevue. Thank you.
What?
Lynn, Mayor, sorry, we can't hear you right now.
Oh, I thought it was somebody else who was muted. Sorry. Councilmember Stokes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Robinson and Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis, and particularly to the staff. It's just amazing work. Your leadership and your facilitation really got us here today. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak on the budget adoption and enjoyed hearing my colleagues so far. And I think we're all very excited about this. And I particularly appreciate Councilmember Robertson's comments on the other aspect to look into next year. And I think that'll be a good idea. You know, we never cover everything exactly, but we covered most of it, and it's really fantastic. I also wanted to give a shout out, and I'm very thankful for the funding for first responders, since I just experienced the need to have first responders. And I have to tell you, I'd rather be here than, you need to be here rather than any other place when something happens, because they do a fantastic job and took well care of me. So I appreciate that. It's just a tiny part of the budget, but it's very important. You know, I'm very supportive of this budget, and I recognize the exceptional difficulty in balancing a budget with this heavy economic impact of COVID on our finances, but on the whole community. And also appreciate that a budget is a living document and can be adjusted and worked on in the future as circumstances may require. And I agree with Councilmember Robertson that next year is going to be another, like another budget go around completely. So it's exciting, and I think we have opportunities to advance in that. But both the council and staff have been given very careful attention to adopting and adapting to the most critical needs of our citizens. And I think that's something we should be very, very proud of in this time period. Among those, I want to specifically emphasize the extremely important work of the emergency shelter operators who do such a great job with limited resources for our most vulnerable. The Sophia Way continues to serve Eastside women in a way that in any way it can. The Congregation for the Homeless helps Eastside men find a path out of homelessness. LifeWire and Friends of Youth look after Eastside families and children, extend another day of hope. And this budget helps fund these 4 shelters. And I'm very hopeful that more funding in the coming year will add, we will soon add even greater support to the essential services of the emergency shelters. You know, the past year, the council's added greater emphasis towards equity and human services. And I think that is the key to all of this. This is the thing that will make Bellevue a standout city in the region, in the country. We're not there yet, as we've acknowledged. We have a lot to work on, but I think this budget and our approach on this is very, very positive and leading us to work in this area, and particularly given that in the community as a whole, and looking at the ads talked about equity in the paper from all the business, from the Chamber of Commerce and everybody else. So we have set ourselves up where we can be leaders in this area and really accomplish what we need to do. You know, the COVID CBG and CARES Act funding allowed the city to expand its reach to more agencies that employ trusted messengers who specialize in specific cultures. Agencies like the Indian Association of Western Washington and the Muslim Community Resource Center and others are trusted partners with the city to strengthen these much needed services. And it'll be critical that more funding in this regard will be considered in 2021. And I'm really looking forward to meeting that challenge and the city helping even more people. Again, I really appreciate the council working together, as other council members have said, to find common ground in the budget for the most important issues. The final budget really puts people first. It puts our community first. It puts the individuals first. It puts the businesses first. It puts the emphasis where it should be, and that's taking care of vulnerable citizens, preserving human services, supporting small businesses, and ensuring core services and infrastructure. 2020 has been a year in the history books. Yet I'm very confident that Bellevue will go into the next year stronger and wiser. As they say, hindsight is 20/20, and it's behind us. Finally, I'm very supportive of the ordinance to adopt the budget, and I look forward to taking that vote. Thank you.
Thank you. That was well said. Council members on.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and City Manager and Tony, all the fellow council members, staff, and the community. I mean, this has been a tough year. And I agree with Councilmember Robertson that, you know, one of the most critical things that we do is adopting a biennial budget, because it does reflect our values. And there's a lot of things that we care about, and there's a limited amount of money. So I'm really proud of the fact that we've really taken a needle and kind of wove it through all of the different things that we care about in our community to come up with this budget. And at a time where we did not get direct COVID relief funding from the federal government, and yet what I saw was a community coming together, right? Our partners stepping up along with us to work on food and shelter and helping our small businesses, and so many different ways that we come together. And at a time when we're doing Zoom most of the year, we haven't had a council retreat. So we're actually trying to figure out how to work together at a time where we don't get to connect in person. And certainly what we've seen in the pandemic is that some of the disparities that were in our community are just amplified now. And we are called as the city to step forward and help our community. And I really think we've done that. So when I think about our human services and the fact that we've increased our funding for human services this year, that we have now this 1590 to be able to move quickly on affordable housing, that we have continued to fund public safety because that is so important to our community, and that we have an economic development plan and steps to move that forward, that we've got money in the budget to do that. Thank you for my colleagues to support the Vision Zero and the growth corridor and moving those forward in the budget so we can act with more urgency. And also the environmental stewardship plan and moving that with urgency and having more of a community engagement. I think those are really important. And then leaning into racial equity. So I appreciate the support for the communities of color and also the cross-cultural center, because that to me is a space of connection. And it's well over time that we move forward with that. So in all of these areas, it's just so important. And I think that our budget is well poises us to be able to be a cost multiplier, to get at different grants to these different things that we care about, to create the partnerships. Thank you for the Bellevue College Connector. And I think that we were able to get some money from our partners to move that forward. And then my hope is that in future years, we'll be able to move forward with a community court, which I think is so important. So again, I just think that this budget really positions us really well towards a more equitable, sustainable, and affordable Bellevue. And it allows us to act with focus, a plan, and to act with urgency. You know, this is an award-winning city of Bellevue. We love this city. And I think that this budget makes so much sense for us to move forward. So thank you very much. And thank you to all that wrote in, attended the public hearings, and gave us feedback. Your voice absolutely matters in this process. And we heard you, and we worked out this balanced budget. And then actually, lastly, I've just got to say to you, Tony, that memory bank of having so many items that you explained really creates a transparency to our budget as well, so that those that want to understand what we're doing have a much better sense for if there were areas that we didn't spend money, why is that? And I think it really helps. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Zahn. Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. What a tough year we just went through. Well, we are still going through, I guess. It's a challenging year. This coronavirus pandemic is creating, it's probably something, the worst thing that usually or sometimes brings out the best in us. I think this is what we're, hope we are looking at. And I want to thank the city staff, Brad, city manager, Tony, financial manager, and all the other department heads and all the staff that has been working so hard to respond to the tough challenges we are facing. I mean, they have worked hard, tightened the belt, and the people have been working under tough circumstances. And they are helping people who are in need, the restaurants, the servers, and we're providing, we're short of money. Obviously, the revenue is down, as we mentioned, $16 to $20 million. And so we are managing it. And in addition, we are putting more money to our human services needs. We are helping people with CARES money, with money that we have in our reserve that we come up with this year 2020. So we're not neglecting it. And while all doing this, we are not neglecting our public safety, our human services, which I just mentioned. Public safety is also very much there. And we're going through a challenge, a crisis of social equity issues. And police responded very well. And we're showing, our response to the people's concerns. At the same time, we're keeping the public safe, making sure that we are taking care of the first and primary priority, of keeping our community safe. And so the city is responding well. And like Councilmember Robertson mentioned, budget is the one and probably the most important thing, responsibility for city council. And we make the difference. It's representing our value. We are the stewards of the people's resources to make sure that we get things done from, for the people that we represent, the people that we serve. So I think that I'm very, very impressed with, again, the best is happening that we see is brought out in the community. And it's bringing out from the perspective of our city council members. We're working collaboratively, we're working very well. We're very well served by our mayor. The mayor has done a tremendous job of working through the council with the council members. And the budget reflects that. And the thing that the budget, I hope it does in fact reflect the value, because we do represent the people and all the people that have come spoken to us and volunteered, all the commissions and all the people that we hear from. And just the business as well. They are our corporate citizens, and they're making sure that we have a healthy community. Without financial resources, we cannot do very much. And so it's the people that really makes a big difference that we represent. And the city manager, again, I did a wonderful job. I remember serving on the council that many years. We've gone through a lot of growing pains, a lot of different challenges, how to do a budget. And the city managers has been fired and hired because of the budget. So this is a tremendous credit, to what we have gone through. And the biggest thing that we've gone through, I believe, after all these years, I would like to make observation. And I'm really glad that this is a consistent agreement that I hear from just now what the council members are talking about what we've done with this city budget, with this budget. The city council is providing something that's very different. What we do through budget is providing the value, and also we're providing our vision and our leadership through this budget. What's going to be like, 2020, 21, 2 years, and then moving forward. We're building the foundation of what, is going to be for the future. And the difference is, I really believe that we looked at it. It's amazing that instead of normally, budgets are provided by government, by institutions to do transactional, to build things that we need and we see them and they serve us. But this budget, especially the amendments we made, with the city council contingency, we are providing a transformational budget instead of a transactional budget. We're looking at people. We're looking at the most important value for our city is people. People. It's building capacity of people who make decisions for us, who make things happen, who make transactions that's important, that will benefit us, the people. So I think that's really if you look at most of the amendments we made, we talk about, racial equity, we're talking about equity initiatives, we talk about cross-culture center. These are the things that bring people together. These things are building the capacity of the people who's going to be involved, engaged, because the future is in collaborative, working together. And so I'm really energized and cannot really say enough that, we talk about people, building people capacity, working together to solve the problems that we will be, not just the problem, but the challenges we'll be facing. And so I want to thank all these folks, thank the council members, thank the mayor for allowing us to have this kind of communication, all these dialogue, all this working together. And finally, but lastly, but not least, I want to thank the people, the public that have elected us, that have trusted us, that has given us the opportunity to serve them, to represent them. And that is not easy. That comes through transparency. That comes from accountability. That comes from responsibility. And I think we've taken on, by doing what we do, those very important elements. And we see that, these are the things that we need to have to move forward so that we can build on the future. And we don't know what the future is exactly going to be. So it's hard to say what transactional things that we need to have. But definitely it's something that we need to build on is in the people, in the projects that we talk about. Again, it's the cross-culture, it's people working together, people have the capacity to solve their own problems. And we've got lots of smart people. We've got people who can do all those things. We got people who are interested, people who are engaged. We have younger people. We have the best school system in the country. These are the things that we are talking about for the future. So our future, based on this budget, looks very bright. And I am very, very, grateful that, we can get through this tough time. And, one thing that's happening is now vaccine is coming out. So I think we are seeing, hopefully, the light at the end of the tunnel. And
Thank you, Councilmember Lee.
Concluded, just one more sentence. Now we are at the time of Advent, Hanukkah, And it's time of celebration and hope. So I think I do have great hope and great thankfulness. We want to celebrate what we've done with this foundation that we're building for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll make just a quick comment, then we'll vote, and then I'll do a little wrap up. So I do agree this is a very responsive and responsible budget. It's responsive to the emerging needs of our community. It's responsible because it's a balanced budget that maintains all the services that make Bellevue what it is, and all our obligations are met with this budget, and we've done that in a very challenging time. So it's a result of engagement with our community members, our businesses, our faith organizations, our excellent staff. I want to especially thank Mr. Miyake for his guidance in this whole process. It's just remarkable what a good job everybody has done. I want to thank the council for working so well together. Everybody has brought amazing input to this budget process, and I'm really proud of the result. I want to thank staff for their excellent work. We do have, I think, the best staff in the whole country working in Bellevue, and we so appreciate you, and the community especially, for all the input that you give. You always let us know when we're missing something, and we appreciate that. So with that, I would like to call for the vote. All those in favor of passing this budget, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
And that passes. That passes 7-0.
Right.
So I do want to give a little recap about the year. I asked staff if they could give me some information on some of the challenges that we've experienced month to month, starting with January, and the way the city responded. And they got about 4 months into it and said, oh my God, it was just like too much to cover. And it was really kind of grim. So I did what anybody would do in my position. I decided to write a poem instead. So I'm going to read it to you. 'Twas 2 weeks after Christmas, and all through the city, Bellevue was ready for change with alacrity. A mayor and deputy were elected with care, and Councilmember Barksdale was welcomed with flair. The council was ready to start work on a plan with ambition, innovation, and a certain elan, when news of a virus with such proportion that warned of death, disease, and destruction. This enormous machine known as Bellevue began its pivot to address this new threat to man, and woman and child, especially our elders, all were at risk and required many helpers. Our businesses closed, our economy shifted, we all wore masks, but we all felt shrifted. Our hospitals filled, PPE was scarce, but the chamber, BDA, and community care. Bellevue rallied our troops, the people responded, free meals, supplies, and volunteers abounded. Support for our businesses began with a start, and our economic team played an amazing part. Curbside pickup and outdoor dining helped patrons eat without confining. Our community partners joined in to support our businesses, residents, and other cohorts. When out on the streets there arose such a clatter, we strained to understand just what was the matter. Then reality dawned and shone such a light, there was no longer doubt of many a plight. Injustice and inequity must be addressed. Without a response, there would never be rest. Conversations began and voices were heard. We're listening, acting, and seeking a cure. The budget process began with many discussions, less money to spend, but increasing demand. The council debated, then staff did the work, and Mr. Miyake brought back a great plan. A budget that supports a well-run city with room for growth and exigency. A balanced budget may seem empirical, but in the midst of a pandemic, it's really a miracle. So tonight we close session on a tumultuous year. 21 will be better, I promise, don't fear. Our city is resilient, we brightened our light. Thank you to all, and to all, good night. And with that, we are adjourned. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Great poem.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Happy New Year. Merry Christmas.